You are now entering the spoiler zone. The following podcast contains explicit plot details and pockets of profanity. You have been warned.
The Exton Moss Experiment. Adventures in Wine and Space with Simon Exton and Ken Moss.
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to another edition of the Exton Moss Experiment. It's another crossover episode, and in a departure from our usual look at archive TV, this time it's my appearance on Hamster Book Club, the Doctor Who novel review podcast hosted by Joe Ford. In this programme, recorded in March 2024, Joe and I discuss the final novel in the 8th Doctor range, the Gallifrey Chronicles.
An hour and a half later, and very far away, a police box that wasn't a police box sped through a place where there was no time and no space. As with a book, you couldn't judge the TARDIS from what it looked like on the outside. It appeared to be an old wooden police telephone box with peeling blue paint. But, again like a book, inside it was far larger, more grand and complicated. And, as with the best novels, you couldn't always tell where it was going. The TARDIS was a machine capable of travelling to any point in space and time. That alone would be enough to make it special. But what really made it unique was that it was the place the Doctor called home. As with his ship, there was more to the Doctor than met the eye. He was an adventurer, a bookworm, a champion, a detective, an explorer, a father and grandfather, a historian, an iconoclast, a jackanapes, a know-it-all, a lord, a meddler, a nuisance. He was old, a physician and a quack, a renegade, a scientist, a traveller, a utopian, a violinist, a widower, a Zoannan. He was youthful, and he was a zealot. One thing he wasn't, though, was human. 2 hearts beat in his chest. He'd lived for centuries at the very least. The Doctor didn't think much about his past. He rarely talked about it, even with his friends. He lived in the now, the only time that meant anything to someone who could spend yesterday in the far future and tomorrow in the olden days. Now he stood at the central console, right in the middle of the cavernous control room, the very first room you'd come to if you'd just stepped inside the TARDIS. The console was hexagonal, the size of a large desk. Thrusting out from the centre right up to the ceiling was a powerful piston encased in a glass tube. It rose and fell, pulsing with blue light as it did so. The Doctor watched it, almost hypnotised. He was still wearing his frock coat. He would occasionally break away to start operating controls, check readouts, and generally fuss about. He wasn't steering the ship though, so much as trying to decide where it was heading. The Doctor was smiling to himself. A tyrant toppled was always a good day's work. The planet Mondova had taken control of had been a beautiful world of orchards, sculpture, and music. Now it could be all those things again. That would be for the people there to decide.
Hamster Book Club, the Doctor Who novel review podcast, with Joe Ford and Ken Moss. The Gallifrey Chronicles, by Lance Parkin.
Welcome back to the Hamster Book Club. My name is Joe Ford, and I am here today with the man with easily the sexiest voice in podcasting. Unfortunately, he brings along smarts and wit with him as well, Mr. Ken Moss. Hello, Ken.
Hello, Joe. It really is, on this one, a pleasure to be back. I'm so glad you asked me to do this one.
I've no idea how this is going to go down because I'm so used to you being such a cynical bastard in podcasts. But I know you love the book we're talking about today.
Oh, God, do I? Yes.
Well, can I just give you carte blanche straight away to just get your sort of geekgasm on with this book then? Yeah. Gush as much as you feel the need to.
Well, I mean, as you certainly know, and other listeners may know, I do lots of other podcasts with other people, primarily Simon Exton. And we tend to come to things from very different angles.
You
One will
do.
push, one will shred, whatever we're watching or listening to. In this instance, I don't think either of us are going to shred, are we?
No, we're not. But before we get to the Gallifrey Chronicles, because this is the first time you've done one of these, hopefully not the last,
I hope so too.
I'd like to ask you a question. And that is, I ask everybody this when they first come on, and it sort of just gets me to hear about your history with the books and how you came to them. What was your very first Doctor Who book that you read? And sort of what was your journey after that with the books?
I knew this was coming, and I've been trying to think what the very first Doctor Who book was that I picked up. I think it was Genesis of the Daleks in our
Oh,
school library, I think. But it's a bit muzzy because I remember vividly sitting in our school library reading the bit where he's got the wires and the Dalek runs over them. So that could be the first book. But after that, our local library in our local village,
did they have a lot?
oh, they had hundreds of them.
Oh, you
Yes.
bastard. My library had none.
Yeah. So I remember certainly things like the Two Doctors and the Faceless Ones, the Target novels, which were magnificent in my head. So I read those way before I'd seen them on UK Gold in the early 90s. I saw them on transmission, but I'd forgotten all about them because I was a kid. But after that, I started buying Doctor Who magazine after the 92, 93 repeat season.
Uh-huh.
And 93 really is where my sort of proper geek journey kicked off. So that, you know, at the ripe old age of 14, 15, I went on this massive nostalgia trip for all those years ago. Uh, so I hoovered up all the VHSs. Mordrin Undead was my first one. And
Uh-huh.
then, of course, the movie came out, and that was this massive, massive event for me. And I'd missed out on the new adventures because I'd read about them in the magazine, but they'd never really. I thought, well, I'm halfway through the run here, and they don't sound like my cup of tea. They don't sound like Doctor Who. They sound a bit adult. And then the TV movie kicked off the BBC range. So I started with the Eight Doctors
Oh
and Devil
dear.
Goblins from Neptune.
Okay.
I hoovered up Eight Doctors,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, in a day.
Yeah, that's all it takes. About
Yeah.
3 hours, I think now. Thank you. It's Terrence, so
And
it's a very easy read.
The Doctor closed the time machine with a sigh. Dear old HG, he murmured. Such an optimist, such an enthusiast, especially for the ladies. The Doctor smiled briefly, as if at some pleasant memory. But then he frowned, as the recent, well, subjectively recent, events at the Millennium celebrations in San Francisco flashed through his mind in a jumble of outrageous images. It had been a weird, fantastic adventure, full of improbable, illogical events. He scowled at the memory of the Master, treating his precious TARDIS as if it were his own. How had he got in the first place? Where had he acquired those mysterious morphotic powers he had made use of so freely? Useless to speculate, decided the Doctor. He would probably never know the answers now. He looked round the vastness of the reconfigured TARDIS control room, with its redwood-panelled walls and complicated console. He had been so pleased with it once. Now it seemed to carry the lingering taint of the Master's presence. The Doctor stood up abruptly, suddenly troubled. Better make one final check, just to make sure that none of the Master's malignant influence remained. Leaving the TARDIS control room, the Doctor made his way to the cloister room. He paced slowly along the pillared walkways and crossed the stone flag floor, entering the massive central structure that held the Eye of Harmony. He stood gazing down at the flat granite sculpture in the shape of a great closed eye. It wasn't the Eye of Harmony at all, of course, not really. Just a symbolic manifestation, an aspect of the great Eye of Harmony on Gallifrey. Created by Omega, stabilized by Rassilon, the eye held a trapped black hole. Its inexhaustible energy powered the whole of Gallifrey, including all the TARDISes with which the Time Lords voyaged through time and space. Even an antiquated Type 40 like this one was directly linked to it. The Doctor studied the eye for a moment longer. It was closed, as it should be. Everything was in order. Except, in the stone corner of the closed eye, something gleamed like a tear. The Doctor leaned forward to study it more closely. It was solid, like a tiny gleaming diamond. Surely it must irritate the eye, thought the Doctor, like those gritty fragments children call sleep that they sometimes find in their eyes upon awakening. He leaned closer still. The little diamond started to blaze even more brightly. It glowed and burned and spun itself into a bolt of pure energy that lashed out and upwards and flashed into the Doctor's eyes, searing across his brain. The Doctor staggered back, his hands to his eyes, and crashed to the ground. As he fell, he heard a mocking voice. "Always one last trap, Doctor. All's ill that ends ill."
I know people have a downer on the Eight Doctors, and I know why, because it's so different from the style of the NAs that I get it. It must have been like the step down from the BBC range to the Christopher Eccleston BBC range. You're sort of stepping down again.
Well, it feels like it, but then you get Vampire Science afterwards, which is effectively a new adventure. It's Kate Orman and John Blunt, isn't it? A new adventure with the Eighth Doctor in it. So I feel as if they were a bit confused in their opening salvo of like, who are we aiming these at, you know? The sort of the kids or the more mature audience that came before?
See, at the time, I really didn't give a shit. That was, to me, proper Doctor Who with who has remained my favourite Doctor, Paul McGann. I love the Eighth Doctor. So I could vividly picture, I mean, there's one scene in The Body Snatchers where he's clinging to this robot's leg, or this big walking machine, as it's walking through the Thames. And there's all sorts of, there's a bit where there's a prostitute thrown out of the window to the Scarrison. They're so vivid, the imagery of those books. That is my golden age of Doctor Who, because it really was just the fans. It wasn't this great popular thing that it's now become, and it felt a bit special.
It's funny, you know, you mentioned The Body Snatchers there. Now, I haven't read The Body Snatchers for about 10, 15 years. And yeah, I can still remember, spoilers for anybody who's listening to this, so skip ahead maybe 15 seconds, the end of a chapter that said Emmeline was turning into a Zygon. I'd just be like, oh my God, I can't put this down. I need to read the next page. It's sort of halfway through the book. It's funny how certain things stick in your head like that. You remember people being eaten by Scarasans. I remember women turning into Zygons.
But there are, I think that some of those BBC books, I can't really speak for the New Adventures, and it would be unfair to comment in any depth. I've read some of the poignant ones, like I read a couple of the Time Worm ones to kick it off. Wasn't mad struck, I've got it. They were very fan continuity heavy, even though, you know, Terrance Dicks, the great Terrance Dicks, kicked those off. And I read Nightshade at some point and was impressed with that. I read Shadowmind, very much less impressed with that.
Yeah.
And I've certainly read Lungbarrow, which was a very clever book. It cleared things up and muddied the water at the same time.
Do you know what I say about the New Adventures is it's pretty much all first-time writers, yeah? The first shot they had at writing a book. And so it goes one or two ways, like it does with a first-time writer. Either they are very good, you know, at their craft, or they're not. So those books are so up and down, depending on who you're reading, you know, and some sort of get worse and others hone their craft. So it's an interesting journey reading them, but you have to wade through a lot of dirge to get to the gold.
Well, again, I'm one of those fans. I had all the New Adventures and read about 10% of them.
Well, you bought them all and didn't read them. Oh, Ken.
I do remember Gary Gillett doing an article in Doctor Who magazine years ago where it was sort of the tropes of a Doctor Who fan, and he's there in an anorak with a satchel on. And one of the tropes of a Doctor Who fan was, has all the New Adventures, hasn't read a one. And I thought, yep, that's me.
So have you still got them?
No, I flogged them all. I bought them.
I was going to say they're worth a pretty penny now.
Well, I got $3,000 for them. which is way more than I
Oh,
paid for
that's
them.
about what I got as well, you know. Did you sell them as a full collection?
Yeah, and because they don't come up as full collections, I could just
No,
basically
I did
ask
them
what I
in
want.
blocks of 5, right? And the ones near the end, you know, the rare ones, they
Mm.
went for about £800 for 5 books. I couldn't believe it. I figured I would get maybe 500 quid for the lot. And as the money was rolling in, I thought, bloody hell. If anyone sort of bought 1 or 2 of these back in the day, they're made.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking back, I could have asked basically a fortune. I could have paid off my mortgage if I'd been savvy enough. But I didn't have the balls to put it on eBay for some sort of ridiculous reserve. But I really should have done.
So did you read all of the Eighth Doctor books?
All of the Eighth Doctor books from beginning to end. Now, those I really did enjoy. There were several phases of the Eighth Doctor books. You had sort of 8 Doctors to alien bodies, and then they took a shift. And then you had alien bodies to interference. Mm-hmm.
That was a dodgy period.
Interference to the burning. And then the burning, well, I suppose the burning to vanishing point, and then, or escape velocity, and then the rest of the series. So there were several things. I do remember reading on the back of Shadows of Avalon that this is the end of a period for the Eighth Doctor. And I read it and thought, how is this any more end of the period than any of the other end of periods?
It's literally passing the baton on, isn't it? The Shadows of Avalon. And now, Ancestor Cell was.
Oh, Peter Angelides, yes. I remember reading that, and that was... because this is heavily referenced in what
Yes, well, yeah, we'll get there. I mean, and there's so many Easter eggs in the Gallifrey Chronicles sort of celebrating and criticizing the Eighth Doctor range. So it's kind of nice that we're looking at the range as a whole. Now, what was your favorite period then of all those periods?
Quite honestly, probably that first 8 Doctors to alien bodies, because they rewarded you for following the characters. I was one of the 3 people that really loved Sam Jones.
Oh, you and my other half.
Oh,
There you
yeah.
go.
Yeah. Because there were several descriptive passages about Sam Jones.
You were 14, right? Yeah.
No, I was 19 when they first started publishing those. And that was part of my awakening period.
Yeah.
So,
Did you see the picture
and
of
Sam...
who they based her on in the Doctor Who magazine? There was a feature, wasn't there, of the blonde girl?
Yeah, and I do have that somewhere. And she looks really thrilled to be posing for that photograph. She's one of the BBC Books staff, I believe.
I wonder where you are now, Sam Jones. Well, she's dead in a grave, if you believe this book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Do you know, my favourite period is, I do like the Steve Cole period of the books, which was from Alien Bodies right the way up until the Ancestor Cell. But I love the Justin Richards bit. I love the 6-part Trapped on Earth books, and then I really love the team of the Eighth Doctor, Fitz and Angie, and I think that sort of run from City of the Dead through to Time Zero is almost like an unbroken run of really great books. So my preference is sort of towards the latter end, but it's nice to hear somebody that likes the stuff right at the start.
Yeah, I think probably because I was brand new to it, and they were all standalone adventures in those days. I mean, you had the whole bit with Sam and the guilt trip on Tractis and Paratractis having killed one of the... I can't remember the name of them.
Is that Dreamstone Moon?
It ran through a few, because I think it was... What was
it's Longest Day, isn't it? Where she leaves him. She kisses him and leaves him for dead. And then Dreamstone Moon, they're both on their own. He's trying to find her and she's trying to avoid him. And then you get the Dalek one where it's just the Doctor, and then you get Seeing Eye.
Oh, Seeing
Which
Eye.
is fabulous, isn't it?
That's a marvellous book. Oh, yeah.
He's awake, shouted Doctor. Akalu started violently. He had been watching the efforts against the fire from his office, the courtyard lit in reds and oranges. The morale facilitator turned sharply, staring at the terminal. "You haven't said a word for weeks," he said.
"They're getting him out, taking him away. You must stop them."
I mean, that one I can picture clear as day. There's one really clever bit where he goes to a receptionist and she won't deal with this bit of paperwork that he's given to her. And he travels to 10 years in the future and it's still on her desk and she's not dealt with it.
Do you remember the bit where Sam finds him and he says it was 3 years of nothing because he tries to escape every way he can possibly think of, and we're with him every step of the way. The thing he doesn't know is that they're looking through his eyes, so they know
Yeah.
exactly what he's doing. Such a clever book. Well, okay, I'm going to throw a question to you then about the Eighth Doctor books. If you could name five that stood out to you as being particularly excellent, what would you choose?
Oh, that's because they're going to be all my personal
Well,
favourites.
go on. That's what I
Well,
want to know.
first and last, Eight Doctors and Gallifrey Chronicles.
Hmm.
I would not be without either of those. This
Okay.
is going to be controversial.
Go on.
War of the Daleks.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Explain yourself, sir.
God, I knew you'd shred me for this because I loved it so much. That was another one I devoured in about a day and a half. And you read this thing, and it's this continuity nightmare. Oh, John Peel. You should have been strung up by the left bollock for that one. So I don't know whether to put that in there, but Vampire
No,
Science
please do. Please
belter.
put War of the Daleks. Is it War of the Daleks the one where he rewrote Remembrance of the Daleks and suddenly Scaro's back with us again?
Yeah, because it wasn't really Skaro at all. It was Antalis, this water world that they
Okay.
vaporized.
And does it have the spider Daleks in it?
Spider Daleks, Strider Daleks, Marine Daleks. Oh, there's all sorts in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. That sounds pretty good now you're talking about. Maybe I should revisit that one.
Some of the imagery in it's brilliant, but the continuity did piss me off. And he also flip-flopped the Renegade and Imperial Daleks just because he didn't like the way round that they were named.
Oh, that's a very fanish mid-90s thing to do, isn't it?
And it was a way of getting Davros to be the Emperor Dalek all along, and the Supreme Dalek was, it's just a mess. It was a mess. But Vampire Science, I remember reading that and being so impressed with that. And what other, the Burning.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Burning was a belter. In fact, that whole Earth arc, I actually thought the most disappointing bit was it was almost a damp squib that it ended on. And
Velocity.
yeah, because I remember he got to St. Louis, this cafe that he built purely to fulfill the Note prophecy.
Yeah.
And then he's like, right, there it is, have the keys. I don't give a shit anymore. I've got my TARDIS back. And he walks through the doors and it all starts coming to life. And that's about the only bit I remember from that book. It's a shame because I'm sure it's very good, but
In there, you've got, like you say, The Burning, which manages to be a very traditional Doctor Who story and completely revolutionise the range at the same time.
oh yeah.
Casualties of War, which is a really great sort of psychological horror. The Turing Test, Father Time. I mean, these are fabulous books.
Oh, they were great. There were some really great books in that run. Father Time.
I don't know how he packed so much. He packed a decade into that book, and it didn't feel rushed, and it was only 280 pages.
There weren't many duds in the Eighth Doctor range. There's some that I read and I've sort of edited out, but the highs I think are really high.
Then I've got one more question for you then before we skip into the Gallifrey Chronicles. And that is, I feel as if the tide's turning, and I've certainly found a lot of people to come onto the book club and sort of laud the Eighth Doctor books. Why are they generally considered lesser or less influential than the New Adventures?
I think because at the time, the New Adventures were too broad and too deep for the small screen. And it was only the fans that were buying it. No casual viewers of Doctor Who were buying those. And you had to stick with them, I think, because there was such a deep-rooted journey for Ace and then Bernice and then Quedge and Roz. And because the tone was so different from televised Doctor Who. I mean, I didn't read a single one that I thought I can picture this on TV.
No, yeah, I agree. Maybe Nightshade. That's just basically Quatermass.
It's
isn't it?
Quatermass, really, yeah. But I mean, it was excellent. And yeah, of the ones that I have read, that's probably the nearest to. But the BBC range, because they were so comparatively trad, I think they were looked at. You'd got, by that point, 7, nearly 8 years of people being used to very different Doctor Who in print. So all the people, basically the fan base that were buying these things, they were suddenly faced with something that was massive step down for them. And so I think you lost a lot of fandom. They were publishing 2 a month, so they must have done quite well for 9 years.
I know that around the Burning, they weren't selling, they were selling in the couple of thousands, which is, sort of death for a book range. I think they just kept going because they wanted a Doctor Who book range going, and they were genuinely sending out boxes and boxes of these books overseas to an orphanage where they were burning them in a furnace to heat the orphanage. Justin Richards tells that story. Yeah.
I do remember hearing that story.
I think that's so sad. One, that they don't have fuel for the orphanage, and two, that they're burning Doctor Who books.
I mean, I can understand why. Again, towards the end of the Eighth Doctor run, these were not trad stories.
No.
There was a very definite middle range with things like Time Zero and Sometime Never, and what was the one with the crystal? The Last Resort, was it?
The Last Resort was... I love The Last Resort, but it's divisive, yeah. I feel like they started going a bit trad towards the end when they knew they were going to end. Tomorrowinders. Oh no, Sleep of Reason isn't very trad either. Deadstone Memorial is. Maybe, yeah, like you say, it's a sort of 50-50 at that point.
The last two or three, they to me were a really solid, very short run of books. Tomorrowinders I've got a load of time for.
Oh, it's glorious, isn't it?
Deadstone Memorial I thought was fantastic. that's another one I hoovered up.
Do you remember the scene of him taking Hazel out on the roof to wave at the stars? I was like, Oh my God, that's Paul McGann from the TV movie. Totally.
It's this really improbable climb up to the roof, and you think, I don't know any houses that are like that, but fair play to you. It works well in print.
And as for the Tomorrowinders, the Mayor of London is going to explode. It was great.
They must not have liked the Mayor of London at the time because he gets eaten in this one.
Yeah. And then what was it? To the Slaughter, which I don't remember much about.
Oh, yes, that was the penultimate one, wasn't it? I can remember the cover, but I can't remember.
It was about the moons of Jupiter and an auction, and it had thinly disguised old Doctor Who monsters in, but they didn't want to pay for them, so they only described them but didn't name them. It was sort of light. It was light and sort of throwaway because all the meat's here in this one.
Just one last note on the BBC range. I think actually you briefly there just touched on possibly one of the problems with the book range as an entire whole. They just didn't pay for any of the classic stuff that was recognizably Doctor Who. So in the whole of 15 years, we had 2 Dalek books. Well, officially Dalek books.
Do you know why that was, though?
It must have been cost issues.
I don't think it was. What? Certainly, because I know Justin Richards a bit, and I've interviewed him a couple of times. And what happened was, if you look at the books, the first half of the Eighth Doctor range, there's a load of continuity. You've got Wirren and Famasi and Daleks and Zygons and all of that. But to the point where it's sort of starting to disappear up its own arse, like it did in the 80s. And Justin Richards kind of went, no. And that's why he said, I want rid of Gallifrey. I want to basically reset the universe. I want a Doctor with no memories so we can actually start telling original stories again. Completely continuity-free stories that stand up in their own right. And that's where that Earth arc starts. And then from that point on, there's really no continuity. And I think that's why I like that run. Because those books are all sort of doing their own thing. They've got their own identity.
Yeah, I can see why that would appeal to some fans. I mean, I am not one of those fans. I found the whole amnesia thing, Gallifrey destroyed. I thought, well, Gallifrey really, it's so thinly scattered through Doctor Who that it doesn't need to get in the way. I've heard the argument that, well, the Time Lords can just swoop in and solve everything, but they never do. They never do. So I've never got the argument that Gallifrey gets in the way. The amnesia thing, I spent the whole run of those books just waiting for him to get it back.
Right.
Again, I can see the argument because, you don't want this Doctor that knows every damn thing, because they do eventually turn into a god that with a single bounty was free. So I can get the reasoning, but because of that complete disjoint with everything that had gone previously, there was no even passing references.
Do you remember at the end of Sometime Never, when all the universes have been restored, and then you've got one of the Council of Eight and a character called Zezan that's in the book, and he turns into the First Doctor because he's got the Doctor's memories, and he's like, "Come on, Zezan, back to the ship," and it's basically Justin Richards explaining how in this new universe you could have a Doctor Who origin story, which I did think was both fucking cheeky and very clever at the same time. Again, it's only something that would be happening in these spin-off medias, but fair play to him.
Oh, and I thought that was actually quite clever. A few people I remember at the time, they took it very literally, that they
Yeah.
thought that that was supposed to be an unearthly child, how it starts. No, mate,
Could
you've
you
missed the
imagine if Ian
point.
Levine had read that? Oh my god.
One leg going and the caps lock button just punched into
Oh.
the floor.
Well,
Oh,
I'll tell you what, right? If you did have issues with the amnesia, and this is a good segue into the book, you must love the bit in this then where Fitz turns around to the doctor and goes, "Oh, you don't remember except when you do. Get over it, doctor. It got old years ago." Like, this is Sam. This is, there's a bit where he really calls him out.
that's quite an uncomfortable scene, that, because they never had any sort of antagonism between them. It was a
Mm.
very blokey, matey relationship, as near as it ever gets on the TARDIS. So for Fitz to round on him like that and all this kettled frustration with his amnesia comes out all at once, that was quite savage.
It's almost like an avatar for the audience, isn't it? For you going, well, yeah, this did get old years ago, and actually you don't remember, what happened with the Yeti and the Tooting Bec, except when you do. And
But
so
how
I
many
thought,
times?
as a way of critiquing the range, the Gallifrey Chronicles is just such a clever piece of work because it not only celebrates everything that came before, and we'll sort of talk about because there's a flashback to Father Time. Obviously, Sam Jones is in there. Angie Kapoor turns up, the destruction of Gallifrey, and all of that. But it does make some quite pointed remarks about the range as well. I don't know if you noticed any of those.
All of them. And I was foolish enough to start writing down the Easter eggs. And then there's just not enough paper in my office.
I've got a few between us. We'll probably get them all.
Well, I'll just open volume 1 of my notes.
Off you go.
The first one I've got written down actually is 22 pages in. There's a Death Comes to Time, Casmus's speech about once long ago on an island in a sea of clouds. That's not the only Death Comes to Time reference. Tanis is mentioned later on.
Yeah.
But only a page later, it goes on about, some terrible book covers. They were the least of the problems with those books.
The actual line is like, whatever the book's literary merits were, the covers were always a problem. Is that Lars Parkin talking to Black Sheep?
Again, I must be one of 2 people, and the other one being the guy at Black Sheep that actually quite like the Black Sheep covers.
I do as well. I do think sometimes they do rely on the sort of swirly pattern thing. And they love skulls. Have you noticed? There's a lot of skulls on them. But the best ones, I think, are really vivid. Think of like Year of Intelligent Tigers with their tiger's eye, and Father Time with the little girl in the snow and stuff like that.
I mean, the Eighth Doctor range, I think it was Steve Cole that kicked it off, and Justin Richards carried it on. They wanted a circular motif. And they'd said right from the start that they weren't going to have Paul McGann's face on it. I think largely because they didn't have many pictures of Paul McGann. So he doesn't appear on very many of them. I remember being wildly excited when he did. So things like Demontage.
Parallel 59? That's the one where it's got the line of blood going down it, and it's a picture of his face.
But there was one where, is it Hope? Where there's 3 of them walking to camera. It's just silhouettes.
That's Adventuress in Henrietta Street, I think you're talking about. It's all in silhouette through a spyglass. There is 3 people on the front of Hope, but it's supposed to be these sort of android characters. They look like they're in a gay disco. It's all very purple. Go and check out that cover, honestly. Any gay disco you go to looks pretty much like that. Well, I tell you what, one of the lines in this is Marnell's books have become an impenetrable jungle, alienated even his most loyal fans. I thought, Lance, honestly, you are cheeky.
Oh, this thing was riddled with it. Like I said, I've not read this since 2005, but it's so circular, this book. I mean, it references the TV movie Sideways, and it references Terence Dix's prose from the Eighth Doctor.
It does, doesn't it? Isn't something called a series of illogical, impenetrable events?
Illogical events, yes.
It's the fight on Gallifrey. It's when Marnell's looking at the end of Gallifrey, I think. Or is it
when he goes and meets Ulysses and Penelope and Lana?
What could it be? I can't remember. I've just put the line. I've put the fight on Gallifrey full of improbable, illogical events. Whatever that means.
Yeah. There's certainly lots of references. Like when Marnell's got his bottle equipment, there's one scene early on where he's sort of tuning in and it describes all the title sequences from Hartnell through to McCoy.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah. Page 36, kids. Look that one up. But it's
Wow.
all about like a light carving up the screen and then swirling into clouds, and then a blue howling tunnel, a star field, and then a purple swirling galaxy. And it's all described in there. Oh,
How did I
it's
miss that? See, I've read it
because
8 times and I missed that.
I think it's just one of those things that there's going to be so much in there that I have missed, because there are references peppered through this thing to other books in the range. There's a reference there to sending K9 off to Espero. And
Yes, that's in Half-Life, a couple of books earlier. Madame Zing, who is heavily implied as compassion.
but I just found that for the first half of the book, certainly, there was a lovely flowing, quite linear narrative to it. You know, you've got Marnell in this Victorian semi in the middle of London with his garage, his books, and this wonderful image. Oh, now, while it's fresh in my mind, who did you have cast as the versions of Marnell? Because I know who I've got in my head.
Well, I think I told you. So I know Lance Parkin always puts Miles Richardson's father in every book, doesn't he? What's the fella's name from House of Cards?
Oh, Ian Richardson. Yeah,
He
that's who I
puts him
had.
in every book. So old Marnell I had as Ian Richardson, and young Marnell I had as Miles Richardson.
Oh, now young Marnell, because I don't know what Miles Richardson looks like, but I had him cast as Colin Firth.
Oh, good choice. Yeah, plummy
Physically, it was Colin
tones.
Firth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
But I mean,
What's
it's just this really unlikable character, Marnell, in this old bookworm stuck on Earth, really bitter about the fact that it's never explained how he's ended up on Earth, is it?
There's a scene towards the end of the book, I think, where he goes off on a mission, doesn't he? No, he's in another book. I knew we'd get tangled up talking about this. He's in another book. I think it's the Infinity Doctors. He goes missing in that book. And then
Ah,
this is where we
right.
catch up with him again. But that's
Right.
also Lance Parkin, the Infinity Doctor. So it's sort of all tying together.
Oh, that was the 35th anniversary adventure. Another great.
Amazing. What's Lance, isn't it? Of course, it's great. But do you know what I absolutely loved about those early scenes with Marnell was one, I loved the idea that he had written out the entirety of Time Lord history in this series of, this ever long series of books, sort of Tolkien-esque length series of books, but with no idea whilst he was writing it that it was all actually fact. And it's not until he regenerates that sort of last link clicks, and then he can use the books to create the bottle to find the doctor. So all the stuff's in there for him to use. I thought that was super, super clever. But then via the bottle, he effectively gets to watch the entire Eighth Doctor book run and critique it as well, which I thought was wonderful. At one point, doesn't he go, I mean, it's a bloody mess. He's got three ninth doctors.
Incarnations.
Yeah.
He says that on page 62.
Is that Rowan Atkinson from Curse of Fatal Death?
Well, I was going to ask you about this. The three that I'd got as logical ones are Christopher Eccleston, Rowan Atkinson, and Richard E. Grant.
Those were the three I had as well. Yes.
But you've also got in there the Nick Briggs Doctor.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course.
He's heavily implied in the comics and things to be the Ninth Doctor.
Mm.
When they didn't really give a toss and they didn't think it was going to come back, it was just sort of like they had this future incarnation. We already had Paul McGann. It was never coming back, so we'll imply. And Shade at some point is it Wormwood? He regenerates from 8 into 9, and that's who the Ninth Doctor is.
Yeah, I do remember all of that. Exciting times, for the comic strips as well. But what's great is whilst Marnell is basically reading the Eighth Doctor adventures, the Doctor, Fitz, and Trix are having a series of little vignettes, aren't they? Little adventures. They go off to a Roman orgy and defeat somebody. They topple a galactic tyrant on his home planet. And I'm sure you noticed, they face the Daleks on Mars, but unfortunately they can't use the word Dalek, but they are very well described within those sequences.
Oh, the Clade.
Clade, yes.
The Clade pop up a couple of times. I think they're in one of the Earth arc run, aren't they?
It's Father Time, yeah. It's Lance Parkin's one.
Yeah. It's peppered. I mean, they have several super condensed adventures within just the opening passages where Marnell's having his periodic rants at his house with Rachel. And it's all just these lovely little, as you say, vignettes leading up to them finally coming together and how they end up coming together. and him being captured and locked up in a cellar, basically.
Well, let's talk about how they come together then, because what Marnell does is lures the Doctor to Earth by leaving an alien device on around a gravestone. What do you think about ceremoniously killing off Sam Jones?
Again, I suppose that was the ultimate dig, wasn't it? I know there wasn't an awful lot of love for Sam Jones, although I was really sad when was he Autumn Mist when she left? I think that was a
I
lot.
know it was interference. Yeah, at the end of
It
interference.
was interference.
Yeah.
So I was gutted when she did, but I know a lot of fans were not. It's just a proto ace. But if you think about it, every single teenager that's been a companion in Doctor Who is effectively an ace. Rose was compared to Ace. Ruby Tuesday, Ruby Sunday, whatever her name is, she has been compared to Ace.
Yeah.
Whereas I think she's far more in touch with Clara, to be honest.
I think Ace is the prototype, isn't she? So they can't help the comparisons. With Sam Jones, I feel like when they lent into that sort of very green PC activist Sam Jones, that was annoying because that was dated even then. But when she was just like a mature young woman being quite competent, she was really fun.
Well, yeah. And then you've got Dark Sam, who was really fun.
Mm.
So, yeah, that was a fairly sideways dig. But also, during both the Eighth Doctor and Past Doctor range at this point, they were killing off companions left, right, and centre. I think Sarah Jane was implied to have snuffed it. Mel.
Bullet Time.
Yeah.
Mel was Heritage. And Harry in Wolfsbane as well.
Yes.
But don't you remember in Sometime Never, there's a chapter in the Council of Eight where they say, you know, we've been excising all these people the Doctor has infected. So he ties it all into one big narrative, all these different deaths. And at the end of the book, when all the universes spring back into life, it undoes all of that. So they're all back to life again. It's very clever.
Yes. Oh, so Sam's nothing to do with that. I thought
No, unfortunately, this is after that. So Sam Jones is dead. And you're the only person not cheering.
I'm not. I'm weeping into my box of Kleenex.
That does then get the Doctor on the scent of Marnell, doesn't it? And then all the conversations can start there.
Yeah, and it's sort of this quite invasion-esque way of tracking down where the TARDIS has gone on the back of a lorry, literally phoning up the haulage company who hired a truck. Yeah.
He's watching just the CCTV cameras going, right, it's gone there, it's gone there. I just like, it's so sort of undramatic, isn't it? That trucks just come along and hauled it away.
It's described in the narrative as this throwaway line. The only sound they could hear was a truck in the background.
Yeah.
Coffin, you've missed it, and then bang, the TARDIS is gone.
And then obviously the Doctor finds Marnell's house, and this is where he's tied to the chair and forced to reckon for what he's done.
See, that was great, really. Like I said, even though I wasn't keen on the whole amnesia thing, those whole scenes where he's tied to the chair, they're so vivid. Every single line in this book, you can hear Paul McGann doing them. And that's not always true with a lot of the rest of the range. Marnell actually gets into the TARDIS at one point. He's got his own key because, spoilers, boys and girls, Marnell is the original owner of the TARDIS.
Oh, that's such a great twist.
Oh, lovely. That comes right towards the end of the book.
Yeah.
But he starts fiddling about with the controls. Just half the systems aren't working. Most of the other half don't even seem to be turned on. And he's just furious that he's TARDIS. And then later in the book, he rattles off alphabetically, starts going on about all the systems that are basically fucked up. He said, well, I don't care. Gets me from A to B.
What I love is, you know, in the face of all of Marnell's accusations, so Marnell shows the Doctor the end of the ancestor cell, and can I say, Lance Parkin rewrites that whole sequence. It is like a movie sequence. It's gorgeous. He manages to tell it on such an epic scale and then bring it down to one room where the Doctor is grappling with grandfather paradox, this twisted version of himself with one arm, and, you know, pulling the lever that destroys Gallifrey. The seas are boiling. But how that's depicted, that's how I figured the Time War was when Russ T. Davies dropped the odd reference. in series 1 to 4. The Time War that I got in Day of the Doctor was Star Wars, Daleks versus Time Lords, pew pew pew. Whereas this, it's just like they talk about people popping in and out of existence and ghosts of people everywhere, them having a record of the future so they can avoid every bullet because they know where they're going to fire. All of that is just so impressive.
Gallifrey's atmosphere was swirling off into space in streams of ionized gas. The ice caps melted, then vaporized. Land and sea were boiling. As great earthquakes rippled across the surface, the cities were shattering or tipping into great chasms of lava. The capital had been the primary target. Not even photons had escaped its destruction. The few timeships that tried to pull away were torn apart. Time and space were screaming as Gallifrey was uprooted from them. The whole planet was distorted, losing form. The ivory moon, Pasithia Gallifreya, was caught and consumed by one of the atmospheric flares. The faction Paradox fleet had ceased to exist some time ago, unnoticed and unmourned. There was a flash as bright as the sun for the merest moment. Annihilation so profound that it stretched deep into the past and far into the future. Then, Gallifrey was gone.
Again, Ancestor Cell, Peter Angelides, God bless the man. That was so well described because it was a proper time war. These two factions, the Time Lords and this unnamed other at the time. I think, have they been called Faction Paradox by then?
Yes, they had. Interference. Yeah, I think Faction Paradox first came in Alien Bodies. Then they were.
That was it.
Father Kreiner, Fitz Kreiner, becoming a member of Faction, but that happened in Interference. And then by the time you get to the Ancestor Cell, they're well established.
Because I'd misremembered. I thought that Fitz, or a version of Fitz, had eventually turned out to be Grandfather Paradox. I'd completely forgotten it was the Doctor.
Well, this is where the rewrite was, because in the Ancestor Cell, it's explicitly stated that the Doctor is Grandfather Paradox, whereas in the Gallifrey Chronicles, that's rewritten. So what you see when you see Grandfather Paradox is a twisted version of yourself. So everybody would see a twisted version of themselves, which I think is a better answer, because I don't want the Doctor becoming that.
Well, no, and I was reading that thinking, well, I don't remember that, but I like that as a sort of, you're facing your own demons, basically, whoever looks at this thing. So yeah, I was kind of fine with that. But I do remember them going further and further back in time. It was very Curse of Fatal Death, traveling further back in time. And the walls of the Panopticon, it was started out as 10-sided, and then it was 9-sided and 8-sided, the further the book went on to show. And Fitz there saying, can't you see what's going on here? What are you going to do when it's a 2-sided room?
Yeah,
that was
great
a brilliant
stuff.
book.
Really great. I mean, it wasn't popular at the time, though, because of what they did to Gallifrey. But I think that was worth celebrating in this book. And Lance just does it in his own prose, obviously. And his prose is superb. It's the same sort of epic prose that he brought to the Infinity Doctors. It's Doctor Who done on an enormous budget. And when that is in between very intimate scenes of just two people talking in a garage, it just shows you the best of Doctor Who, doesn't it? Sort of the epic and the intimate side by side.
Well, I thought this because one of the problems I've got with modern Doctor Who is that it's all epic with none of that intimate sausage sandwiches by the fire, glass of brandy and carpet slippers interaction between characters anymore. There's no scene setting. You launch straight in. Great orchestral score. I'm afraid to say, even the audios, they've all gone bang, bang, boom, boom, 100 miles an hour, blinking, you've missed it. This line of dialogue's important. You've missed it? Oh, well, tough. The next 5 scenes aren't going to make sense.
They all start, Ken, with that orchestral sweep, don't they? And you're like, oh, here we go. Another movie soundtrack, right? Let's go.
They do, and I miss the wormeries. And
the Spectre of Lanyon Moore.
Oh, they land on a heath and he's got a cold.
And the worst thing that happens is Evelyn smashes a window, it's great.
But it's so small scale. I mean, the first major sort of battle in the audio range, I think, was the Apocalypse element, where the Daleks invade Gallery and there's gantries falling down. But
But
it was
it
one
felt fresh,
scene.
didn't it? It felt fresh then.
It
Now
was
it's just
fresh, and it
all the
wasn't all the way
time.
through. Oh, yeah. It is all the time. And audio-wise, that's wearing. By the same token, I don't think that relentless prose that's all huge cataclysmic explosions works very well as a constant.
I
This
do
book
think,
nails it right.
yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's something they got really right towards the end. I can remember at the end of the Tomorrow Windows, after all the bangs and whistles, they're literally sitting in a pub having a drink, the
Yeah.
three of them. And I remember, obviously, the bit in the Deadstone Memorial, which is all set in that house. So it's just full of intimate moments, isn't it? Of him just helping that one family. And I remember Fitz going, "You've got the whole universe to save. Why are we doing this?" And he goes, "What makes this one family any less important than the rest of the universe? We're here to help." It's great.
Well, you get a flash of that in this when Fitz and Trix, they get together in this book. I don't
Oh,
remember.
having it off and then some, aren't they?
Oh, yes, and then.
Who's Trix then? Who did you cast as Trix?
She was a difficult one. I've got the general type in my head. It was sort of, oh, who was Harley Quinn?
Oh,
What
we're
was
going
her?
down the same lines because I just saw Jessica Rabbit. Do you know?
Yeah, sort of, a little bit more roughed up. I mean, Trix I always saw as, I mean, she was always a bit of an edgy character. You never quite knew what was going on with her in her
Like
head.
that though.
You couldn't trust her. She was basically a hot mess. I mean, from my point of view, she was the sort of girl that I would have been like a moth to a flame. I would have wanted that with every loin, but
You
knowing
are
full
Fitz
well
then,
that I
yeah?
was, well, I would have come out just a spat out mess because that's what women like that do. I'm sure the gay equivalent is true as well, of course. There must be, you'll have your
Absolutely.
hot messes.
Yeah.
But that was the sort of character I had Trix as. Whereas Fitz, Doctor Who magazine's got a lot to answer for. I seem to remember him being the guy who played one of the Blake Seven lot, and it's gone out of my head.
Not Villa.
Oh, yeah, Villain.
Oh, do you know who I saw? I saw somebody much hotter, but then obviously that's where my mind goes. It's Matt D'Angelo who played him in the Big Finish audio. And I know he's a bit too pretty, but I like thinking about pretty men. So I just thought of Matt D'Angelo roughed up.
Well, Big Finish, they really tried to distance themselves from the books to the point where,
The eighth Doctor books.
yeah,
Not the
and
New
I
Adventures.
think that was a mistake because there is room for them all to rub along, but they really wanted to get away from it. And then bang, 120 releases in, we'll have Fitz in there. So,
There's space for more, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think you were pointing us to the scene in the pub where he sings the two Beatles songs from an alternative universe. Is that the intimate moment you were talking about?
no, it was where they get to New York, I think. Or it might even be before that, but they go shopping and they go for a meal with Angie and Greg. And Fitz is just sat there thinking, is this it then? There's no aliens or planets to save. This is it. Real life's kicking in now. And I'm not really sure I like it that much. I want my space-time adventures back. And he's really wrestling with the fact that this is his life now.
I think that needed to happen though, because he'd been a companion for so long. If he'd have just left, it would have felt really anticlimactic. And he realizes he's outgrown the Doctor by this point, that he knows he's got to move on and grow up and build himself a life. And he's got this fabulous woman who turns out to be completely rich as well. So he's got the perfect way of doing it. But he loves the Doctor and he loves the adventuring. So he's sort of torn between the two. So the fact that that happens in stages in this book, and it is that bit, the bit where he's in the pub strumming his guitar to a crowd of about 20 people. And it says at the end of the passage, it's the happiest he's ever been in his life. That simple sort of mundane, intimate moment. So it's actually packed full of them, this book, the epic and the intimate.
Yeah, and I like the way, even though I wasn't overly fond of Angie or Trix, because I just couldn't get a handle on it. Angie was sort of the new version of Tegan.
She was a
want to
bitch.
be there.
I loved her. What a cow she was. She was
Now
horrible
her,
to
I
everyone. I
can.
was like, I love you.
Well, the last run of companions, you had Compassion, who I always had at the time as Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, me too.
And
Me too.
Angie, again, Doctor Who magazine, I've got to thank for this, but it never shifted.
Connie Huck.
No, one of the women from This Life.
Oh, yeah, that's the other one I always hear as well. Yeah.
Oh, the hot Indian woman from This Life. I wonder where she is now.
But do you know, Angie had a brilliant run, as in she joins the Doctor, her partner dies, and we have a series of books dealing with the grief. Then we have a series of books where she's sort of adjusting to being in the TARDIS. Then you get to the point where she's actually enjoying being in the TARDIS. Then he loses his heart. And everything gets a bit scary, and she can't really decide whether she wants to stay or not. And then the alternative universe stuff happens, so she can't leave. And then she gets to leave and be happy. And it is actually, for a book companion, it's a proper thought through run. Sort of whether you like her or not, I think it's quite well done.
I don't have any major problems with what they did. I just couldn't get invested in her. And I can't pin down why. I think it's probably because she was initially so reluctant. And if you've got a character that's just constantly, yeah, whatever, you can't really immediately invest in that. I agree, it was something different, but you've only got so many companion tropes to go through.
Yeah.
So I feel sorry for them when they have to create new companions. They've got to find now more and more contrived ways of getting a companion on board the TARDIS. It can't be plucky young girl who happens to be in an adventure. Would you like to come with me, my dear? Oh yes, Doctor.
It just seems to have all been done now, doesn't it? Like it's all been done.
I'm just waiting for the major plot twist with Ruby that actually she's some construct that's been conjured into existence. That's why her life doesn't make any sense, and it can't just be some orphan girl that's been adopted. There'll have to be some twist at the end.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
Although I did love that Ange got a happy ending in the end. You know, she marries somebody and then she's got this deal going on with Trix, hasn't she? Where Trix is on the adventures in the future and then she comes back to the present and she divvies out all of the papers. So she's in the stocks trade and she's like, right, we're going to put money on this, knowing that that's what's going to happen. So they're both rich as a result. She's got this high powered job and Fitz sits there in the pub, in the restaurant and goes to Angie. So, how did you adjust to life after traveling the universe and going to all those planets? And she's been so embarrassed by her time, she hasn't told her other half about it.
Well, they've been together a year or something, and she's not.
Imagine that conversation. Oh, yeah, he's mad. Ignore him.
But I like the way that they tied them all together. So at the end of the range, the companions, they've all got this little support network once the adventures are finished.
Yeah.
And I think Angie and Trix are like, Fitz says at some point, do you think the Doctor would approve of this? And Angie, just cool as you like, says, he knows.
Yes.
Like, don't think we're pulling the wool over his eyes. He knows. He just doesn't care.
Well, you want to talk about cool as a cucumber? What about when the Doctor discovers that the reason why he's got amnesia is because he destroyed his entire planet and all of his people, and he basically shrugs his shoulders and goes, and? You know,
well, there must have been a good reason for it.
Yeah.
You know, where's the context?
And Marnold literally can't believe his ears, can he? He's like, are you kidding me right now? And the Doctor's like, look, let's just work together to figure out what's happened when Gallifrey was destroyed, because we've lost sort of 4 or 5 minutes, haven't we? At the end of that, we don't know what happened. So there's a mystery there. If I'm guilty, then fine, sentence me, execute me, whatever, but let's figure it out. There's a real maturity to those scenes.
There is, and there's a lovely scene where, because the Doctor escapes his bonds, have been tied up by lots of people over the years, and then he just hands them the rope. And they weld him to the chair, and he manages eventually to get out of that, and he just walks upstairs and confronts Marnell and Rachel.
Do you remember Rachel's on the bed, isn't it? And he just walks in and goes, oh, this is awkward. Sorry.
But there's just this, look, I'll tell you what you want. We don't need to do all this. And he just shakes hands with Marnell and let's have a chat. I'll be a prisoner, no worries, but stop with the guns and manacles. And it's so Paul McGann.
Yeah, it really, really is. Okay, well then let's deal with the big revelation, because essentially the reason why, and I think this is genius, because it kind of gives an explanation as to why the Doctor hasn't gone looking for those memories, is because the entire body of the Matrix, all of those Time Lord brains, are super compressed and inside his head. And that's why he's lost all of his memories, because there's no space for anything else, essentially. And he's got like this pre-programmed thing in there that if he goes looking for it, it's going to kick out all of these Time Lord memories and they'll be gone forever. I just thought that was such a clever way of Lars Barking going, well, why the hell hasn't he gone looking for the past? Why the hell, haven't we given him his memories back? He actually does give a proper reason for it.
He does, and it's very cleverly done. I think my only beef with this book, is it doesn't quite resolve everything. So we get the reasons why he's where he is, like the Matrix is super condensed, and every time he tries to think about it, there's this big sort of no entry sign in his head.
It's McCoy, isn't it? It's McCoy in his head.
Oh, yeah, behind the iron gate.
Going, go away and get out of it. And that first comes in camera obscura when we go inside his head, and he says in camera obscura, which shows you how well thought through these are, he says the number of Time Lord brains in camera obscura, and he goes, just remember, subtract the 5 from the end, which is the 5 Time Lords that we've been told previously still exist. So they have put some thought into this sort of arc.
This is what I like about the range. It was peppered through. There was a continuity. It wasn't just a scribble with crayons. This is my idea of Doctor Who from each writer. There was an actual range editor doing some background work.
Not sure they always pull it off, but the ambition is there, I think.
Oh, there was a definite ambition. And I mean, it's like the TV series doesn't always manage it. Even though so I'm not going to criticize too hard for that. But at least there was somebody behind the scenes with a vision for the series. There were 2 range editors, weren't there? There were only 2.
Yeah, there was Steve Cole for the first half, Justin Richards for the second half.
Yeah. And they both had their own vision for things. And I can get on board with that. But with the super compressed memories thing, it was there. And the whole setup was there to go off and get these things out. He couldn't just remember them because it'd kill him. The TARDIS didn't have the machinery to be able to download the memories. His portion of memories that had been deleted using the telepathic circuits, they were gone, but he didn't know where they were. So it's all semi-resolved, but it's left there. That's it. So he's still, at the end of the book, not got his memories back. The Matrix isn't restored.
And Gallifrey, because they say, don't they? Oh, Marnell goes, we're going to build the new Gallifrey, and you're going to be at the heart of it, Doctor. And unfortunately, it's bad timing because Gallifrey's about to be destroyed again in the new series, which is due next year.
Well, I think, if I remember rightly, Gallifrey Chronicles was actually published after Christopher Eccleston's series had aired.
That's bad timing, isn't it?
Yeah. They knew. I mean, it wasn't like it was a surprise. They'd had 2 years to prepare for it. My only beef is that they didn't finish the story.
I think the idea was that, like the comics did, the comics had the Doctor going over the hill into the sunshine with Destry at the end of that run, and this ends with the Doctor jumping into the Vor mountain to go and defeat them. I think the idea is like the adventures go on. This isn't the end of the 8th Doctor run, and a lot more will come afterwards. And I do kind of like that. But yeah, I get what you mean. You kind of almost want a complete reset to pass the baton over to the series again, don't you? But it's all implied rather than shown.
Yeah. And to be honest, all that Vor bit, because more than halfway into the book,
about 2/3 in, I think.
Yeah. You get this alien antagonist rather, just this swarm of flies invade Earth. It doesn't entirely fit. It's just sort of there to give the companions something to do.
Do you know why he did that? So I interviewed Lars Barking recently, and they basically realised they hadn't done in the 8th Doctor line a proper aliens invade Earth story. So he was like, and he did the same thing in the Dying Days, because he was like, well, we haven't done one in the New Adventures either. So he ended both ranges and he threw in an alien invasion. I think part of the idea was that, because I do think the scenes of, do you remember when the flies swarm on the high street and there's someone coming out of HMV with a bag and the Vor just flies down and chops his head off and eats him? I was like, oh, that could be me. I used to go in HMV all the time.
I have notes on this, and it's specifically that all these alien invasions, particularly in prose or in audio, you're left to your own imagination. Oh, they're coming out of the sky. There's pew, pew, bang, bang. When you boil it down to HMV, I've all been in HMV, so immediately you're pinpointing very vividly in your own head that scene because it's something you can lock onto. And that, the HMV scene, completely crystallized that invasion because you can see it more vividly than just a record shop or something like that.
Well, I've got to be honest with you as well. I fucking hate flies, blue
Me
bottles.
too.
I
Yep, they're
really hate
disgusting.
them because of the vomit and the shit and the fact that they eat it. There's just something so gross about flies. I hate the sound of them as well. So the thought of enormous flies coming down and attacking me and vomiting on me, which is what they do with everybody on this, is really gross. It's some of the most horrific imagery, I think, in the entire run. But the point I was getting at there was I think the idea of the Vor is because them attacking everybody, it's not what's happening, is it? It's a hallucination. Everybody's in fact still alive, but they make you think that they're dead so they can collect everybody up as food. It allows the doctor to bring everybody back to life at the end of the story, technically. So if the plane that Fitz is on gets attacked by the flies in a brilliant sequence, it goes down onto the tarmac, flames everywhere, and he's killed by the Vor, and Trix is absolutely devastated. And then in a spectacular flourish, in a way that you can only imagine Paul McGann doing, he brings Fitz back to life at the end of the story, exactly the same way he did with Grace and Chang Li in the TV movie. And he even has the line, on my first day on the job, I brought someone back to
Yeah.
life.
Oh, I got the tingle with that because there's so much in this that loops back to the TV movie. He goes into what in the TV movie is referred to as the cloister room, and everybody ever since has tried to distance themselves from calling it the cloister room. This is identified as the power room.
Yes.
And the Eye of Harmony is, in fact, this 30-foot iron ball that just happens to have a crack in it that makes it look like an eye. And he's installed a lever to open the eye in the intervening God knows how many adventures.
But it is described exactly the same way as the TV movie, isn't it? That room.
Oh, it is.
It is exactly how it looks. And isn't the crack in the ball what brings the Vor to Earth? That's the thing that attracts them, isn't it?
Well, basically, when the Master opens it up and there's that blue hologram of the Doctor eating jelly babies in it when he's talking to Chang Li, that's basically a million times brighter. It attracts the Vor. The entire Vor moon is then super condensed over that and sucked into the Eye of Harmony. And you've got the Master in there.
Yes, yeah, he appears, doesn't he? He talks to the Doctor and says, I'm going to show you. That's when you find out that it was Marnell's TARDIS, because he shows him Marnell and actually going on missions in the Doctor's TARDIS.
Yes. But I noticed that, because in the earlier books, the Master from the TV movie, they were very nebulous about it. He appears on a screen in one of the TARDIS rooms that the Doctor periodically will nip off and have a chat with. And all he's describing is wearing a suit with a blue rosette on it. They do have a conversation in one of the books where the Master's not got a goatee beard, but the Doctor does.
The fellow with the blue rosette turns up and it is the Master. It's implied to be in the Adventuress in Henrietta Street as well.
Yes.
Again, all these things sort of seeking into this.
I love this. The one question I was going to ask, well, there's two questions actually while they're fresh in my mind. One, the Time Lords are implied to be the Doctor, Romana, the Master, and who's the one with the bent nose and the dice?
No idea. No idea. But the other one's supposed to be Iris, isn't it? Because she's in Mad Dogs and Englishmen.
Oh, is that the one with the long hair?
I think it's supposed to be, yeah. Because she in that at the end, the Doctor goes, I'm not on my own anymore. I've met one of the five,
Right. Well, I've miscast Romana, Lalla Ward. But the other thing is, throughout the middle to towards the end range of the Eighth Doctor, Sabbath was the main antagonist. He cropped up a lot. Now, in my head, I know who I'd cast him as. Who was he in your head? Did you have anybody in mind?
I just saw like a big brute of a bloke like Brian Glover, That sort of man. With fists for hams. No, sorry. Hams for fists. That's what they described, isn't it? Yeah. Fists for hams. Jesus.
And he was, and in several of the books, he was described with a shaved head. But the shaved head bit, I don't remember being his initial description. So for a very long time, I had him as John Rhys-Davies from Sliders.
Oh, good choice. Yeah, he's a big, bulky bloke, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was that
choice.
Arturo character. He was Sabbath for me in my head for most of the books.
And I'm pleased he got a reference in this as well, because that is a good sort of 15-book run that he appears in. So he gets a tick as well. Lars Parkin is genuinely, he's not only bringing the Eighth Doctor books to an end and celebrating and criticizing the entire run, he is also setting up the show for the new series coming along because there's a sequence where the bottle that Marnell's created to look at the Doctor's past, that's nuclear powered, isn't it? And he throws
Oh,
it into the TARDIS. And then there's this incredible sequence where it tears through every corridor in the TARDIS and basically obliterates everything. All of the Eighth Doctor adventures are torn away. Everything he's taken, Fitz's room, everybody's room, and it's just left as this twisted, sort of crunchy, smoking shell inside, basically ready for Christopher Eccleston.
that whole sequence is so vivid about the TARDIS getting a reset. He's left just with this bare TARDIS with a console in it. All the buttons and switches are melted. The wood's all burnt and charred. Nothing really works while it reheals itself. And it doesn't go as far as showing how it's rehealing itself. There's no hint at all that it's turning into the War Doctor's TARDIS or anything like that.
That you love as well, the way he sort of pats the TARDIS as he throws it in and says,
Oh,
prepare
brace
yourself,
old
oh girl. Yeah, this is going to hurt.
It's so lovingly done, that sort of brace yourself, old girl.
Circling back to the Vor for a second, the other reason I think they're in there as well, because I don't think those scenes harm the book, but you're right, it is distant from the other stuff that it's doing. I think it's sort of there as like business goes on, as the Doctor's going through, he's discovering all this about his past and what he's done and his people and his companions are leaving him and all that's going on. But these alien invasions and the daily business still goes on. So that's what I think the ending's about when he jumps into the volcano. It's like, okay, I've got all this stuff to deal with, but do you know what? Our usual adventures don't stop because I've got all this stuff to do with. And he leaps into the volcano, coattails flying. It's fabulous.
Well, Trix does have a throwaway line because Fitz, he's not going to die. And even if he does, he'll just come back better than ever before.
Yeah.
And Trix tosses in there, hope he's got better dress sense next time. That little throwaway kiss to Eccleston's leather jacket.
I don't know if you remember, but when the Eighth Doctor looked into the Tomorrow windows, the mirror, it gives you a sort of possible future, right? So it goes through all the perspective. You see the Richard E. Grant Doctor in the mirror, you see the Rowan Atkinson Doctor in the mirror, and actually, because he'd already been cast, Johnny Morris describes the Christopher Eccleston Doctor. Technically, that's his first appearance in Doctor Who. Is in the Tomorrow Windows.
It is. You see, again, there was a really lovely set of writers at that time, and I'm glad that they gave it to, because they did the same with the New Adventures. They gave Longbarrow to Mark Platt, so it was a big hitter. It wasn't just some fan that was spaffing off a continuity-heavy novel. It was a proper writer doing it properly, because a lot of the New Adventures writers were fans that somehow, I mean, you listen to interviews with Peter Darvill Evans, and he's been very diplomatic about it, but you can read through the lines that a lot of what landed on his desk was utter shite that he had to basically rewrite from the ground up.
He found a stable, didn't he? Paul Cornell, Kate Orman, Lars Parkin. He's like, will you please write me some more, please? So I've got some good stuff to put out as well.
Oh, it was such a shame because, again, it's no different, though, really, to the TV series. You listen to Terrance Dicks, rewrite after rewrite after rewrite, and they just get worse and worse. So the form was employ a writer, send back a draft with notes, get him to redraft it, and after that, pay him off. Yeah. And whatever needs doing, rewrite it. And it's always stuck with me as probably the best way of rescuing a script that's in a lot of trouble. Do it yourself.
What I've learned by talking to some of the authors is that the Virgin books, it was a much more collaborative process with the editors. So there was a lot of editor involvement. Whereas the BBC books, it was essentially, this is what we want you to write, some notes, and it was left to the writer. So I think that's why with the BBC books, sort of the best writers shine through because it's entirely their vision.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, from what I've seen, what did I read? Shadowmind by
Christopher Bewlis.
Christopher Bewlis. Yeah. That had a lot of problems.
They often do,
The only one that leaps to mind from him, actually, because did he do Crystal Bucephalus?
He did. He wrote for every single Doctor. I think he wrote about 14 books in total. And some of them I quite like, but none of them are exceptional. He's a meat and potatoes Doctor Who writer. But sometimes you fancy meat and potatoes, you know?
I'm just going through the rest of my notes on some of the little golden nuggets that were peppered through this thing.
Yeah,
I mean, this whole book is just 280 pages of little Easter eggs. You've nailed that down. You mentioned earlier the argument between Fitz and the Doctor about his memories, but he spits back Fitz with 2 hearts and no balls. Is that how it works?
Oh, it's a great line, isn't it? Only in the books.
One of the other bits, which I really loved, was Marnell's gun, the serious indifference gun, where he fires this staser at people and they just don't care and wander off. There's a lot of police officers outside his house. He shoots them and they just lose interest in arresting him. Wander off.
Oh man, I'd love that gun, wouldn't you?
Well, it's like Eddie Izzard's set the phasers on limp, Captain.
I've got another Easter egg. At one point, there's the exchange. Freud had a word for that. Transference.
Oh, yes.
Which is from the TV movie.
And then Rachel corrects him because it's not. It's something completely different. But yeah, the little lines in there. I've got another one.
Hang on. Lance actually has one of the characters go, I've tried to put his adventures in chronological order, but it's impossible. And this is the man who wrote Doctor Who: A History, who literally tried to put all of the Doctor Who adventures in order.
I've never read that book. I wanted to get hold of it. That's the one with, I can picture it. It's sort of bluey with Sylvester McCoy's eye on the front cover, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there's about 15 versions of it now. So make sure you get the latest one if you do.
But I remember seeing that advertised at the time because that was a long time ago, the first volume of that. And you just think, you must be awake all night, every night, trying to, Mark's chronology moment. That's impossible.
I don't worry about that stuff, Ken. I've got a life. I mean, he sits there organising the shelves every day, and I'm like, well, you have fun. I'll be up here recording a podcast. Some people really care about that stuff, and, well, I don't. But I did like the joke.
I used to. In recent years, I've just sort of let it go because, particularly with the advent of the Stephen Moffat era, the whole wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, they'd really made an effort to try and get continuity and canon ironed out a little bit and fit things together. And then Stephen Moffat came along and was like, yeah, I don't care about any of that. Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, it explains everything away. And ever since then, it's been just forget about it. Yeah, just don't worry about it because none of this makes sense now.
I'm just going to throw random things in the air now because I've got loads of notes, right? And I just want just some fun bits. There's a sequence in the Roman orgy bit where they're trying to pretend that they're not time travelers to this alien. And Fitz goes, Christ, on a bike. So the alien goes, so you're time travelers? He goes, no. Well, then can you explain to me how you know the name of a deity who is not yet born and a mode of transport that has yet to be invented? He writes brilliant dialogue.
Well, that same alien is on about, because they say, you've come to stop the eruption at Pompeii. He says, right, that's 40 years in the future. And then he goes, no, I've come to stop some obscure person from marrying some other obscure person who'll give birth to someone who'll write something that will destroy my entire thing. And it's just this minuscule thing in history that has no bearing on humanity.
He's a really crap villain, isn't it? I think Lance is making a point there. In fact, the Doctor even does the rebus operation thing where he sleight of hands the bomb back to him and turns him into mincemeat. Oh, it's wonderful.
Those little mini adventures just between chapters.
I mean, how gorgeous is the flashback to Miranda? And it's sort of, again, leading into the snow from Father Time. And it's an alien invasion through emojis and texts.
Yes.
I wish that had been a bigger book, if I'm honest, but I'm grateful for the chapter.
Well, one of the other things just leapt to mind, we have touched on it, but the cut scene, there's a few interludes in between chapters here and there, but one of them is, and they're never explicitly said, but we know this from lore, the Doctor's mum and dad.
Yes.
And
Ulysses, is it?
Ulysses and Penelope, yeah. Penelope's explicitly said to be human in this.
On his mother's side.
On his mother's side. Yeah, so, I mean, that was something that it was heavily hinted at in the books, and you probably know more about the Virgin Range than I do. Well, you do. The Doctor's parentage, was that ever hinted at in the
It
NA?
hinted, but not explicitly stated. I remember Penelope Gate featured in The Room with No Doors, which is the penultimate new adventure. I'm not as heavily into those as the Eighth Doctor books, so I don't know all of the details, but it is implied rather than explicitly stated. But, he says it here, doesn't he, basically?
And Lana's the one the Doctor was knocking off in the Infinity Doctors, isn't
That's
she?
the one. Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So again, it's all just tied into this massive web. What do you think about this then? We had adventures together? The Doctor was rather cheered by the thought. Affirmative. Its tail wagged.
Oh, that whole sequence.
The Doctor had read all the books he'd brought with him. He knew a little more about his home planet now, but what he knew was hardly comprehensive. If he'd grabbed an armful of random novels from a London library, would he have a full understanding of the history and culture of Earth? He'd have to try it sometime as an exercise. For now, he'd got something else to do. The back wall. The Doctor had found a cutting torch in one of the storerooms. He had gone to the back wall and was burning his way through it. He'd cut a line up from the floor to the ceiling. Now he began cutting a horizontal line. Even though the wall was damaged, it was slow work, but it gave him time to think about what he'd read. Gallifrey was a contradiction. A world of futuristic control rooms manned by dusty old men in ornate collars. Monks walking on stone floors, underneath which sat a black hole. Although Meinald's narration revelled in the ritual, the repetition, the routine, the Doctor found himself unmoved. It was no way to live a life. He moved the cutting beam down. Finally, he reached a long crack in the floor. The rough oblong he'd cut in the wall hung there for a moment, until the Doctor pushed it over. Through the new doorway was more corridor. It was with a distinct sense of anticlimax that the Doctor stepped over the threshold into the uncharted regions of his TARDIS. 50 yards down the corridor, and his mood hadn't improved. "There's nothing here," he complained. But he'd heard scratching at the wall many times, so this couldn't be true. The Doctor knelt down and examined the floor. Nothing. At the end of the far corridor, round the first corner, he heard a whirring noise, like servo motors. It was heading this way. The Doctor stood, ready for the new arrival. It was a robot. It moved smoothly, hovering a little off the ground. It was battleship grey, with what looked like a gun and some sort of sucker cup. It watched him with a single electronic eye. "You are the Doctor," it said in a metallic voice. "Yes, delighted to meet you," he replied. The machine considered its response. "I must kill the Doctor," it concluded. The gun flared with light, and the Doctor dived out of the way. The beam shot past him and was absorbed harmlessly by the wall. He'd been half expecting a response like that. The Doctor was on his feet, running back to the hole he'd cut. "Kill the Doctor," the robot repeated, rolling after him. The Doctor ducked left, and an energy bolt whizzed past him. As he raced back into the part of the TARDIS he knew, the Doctor had one thought. Why on earth would anyone build a robot in the shape of a dog?
Isn't it gorgeous? I mean, that's basically the old series coming back now. It's sort of like claiming the continuity again by throwing K9 in there. And it's like, okay, we're going back to where we were. We've done what we've done with the Eighth Doctor books, and we're back into sort of Doctor Who of old now. And it does feel really refreshing.
Well, I've kind of spoiled that sequence by recording it, but it's so beautiful. I mean, the twist, the very last line of that whole scene, that it's K9. How fucking clever is that?
Yeah. And K9 obviously is in the ancestor cell, and he does go missing at the end of the book. And it turns out he's been in the TARDIS this whole fucking time on that wall. And in the Trading Futures, which was Lance Parkin's Bond pastiche, there is a scene where the Doctor walks along a corridor and hears scratching behind a wall and goes, "Oh, I wonder what that is." Oh, well, I'll find out one day. Again, it's leading up to this, and that's about 15
Oh,
books
way
ago.
before, yeah.
It's good
Lance
stuff.
Parkin, you wonderful man. He
Very.
really got Doctor Who prose.
Well, I've got a sort of final question for you, and then I'd like to sort of throw it out to you to summarize your thoughts. Do you think this book can exist as a book in its own right, or is this just a book for Doctor Who fans that would understand all the references?
You probably could read it as a standalone, but because the Eighth Doctor is really quite niche and not the best well known, and it is so heavily peppered with little references that are very clearly references to stuff that's happened in the past and the whole Gallifrey continuity. So this is more a book to repay those that have stayed the course with the
Yeah.
book series. There's not a slight on it in any way, but if we're honest with ourselves, all of the book ranges, well, certainly the Eighth Doctors and the New Adventures, they were for Doctor Who fans. They were not for people just wandering along a bookshop. Oh, I used to like Doctor Who. I'll read one of those. They just weren't.
And then I don't think it's out of line to say with both of those ranges. I think the New Adventures because they pushed so far away from what the TV series did, and then the Eighth Doctor books because it got a bit tangled in both editors' times, somewhere in the middle, that a good portion of the initial readership did drop off. So as a sort of gift to those people that did cling on to the end, it's really rewarding.
I did feel that I'd been rewarded for staying the course, yeah, because there were so many Easter eggs. And I mean, a lot of them I missed first time around. And it's been, what, no, bloody hell, 19 years since I read that book. And I can still remember vast chunks of it, clear as day. That's how good it is, this book.
What I would say about the Gallifrey Chronicles is, yeah, I kind of think this is for fans, but it's a shame because individual passages are so beautifully written. It's a shame that, more people aren't going to read this stuff. But, that's just an extra gift for those of us that are, right?
I think the only Doctor Who book from the Eighth Doctor range, and it's not even from the Eighth Doctor range, that is so beautiful that it could just be picked up and read is actually the Infinity Doctors. If you just had the Infinity Doctors as the only ever Doctor Who novel,
It,
anybody could read that.
and it does feel like just a madly ambitious science fiction book, doesn't it? The Doctor's regeneration isn't even specifically stated, so he is just a character in the book. It's not like you slot it in this period of time. The idea is it's the Doctor on Gallifrey. You make your choice, but just read this as a science fiction book.
Well, Lance Parkin has said that the casting was Paul McGann as a very young man,
Ah,
but
okay.
it wasn't the Eighth Doctor. But I think somebody, I don't know whether that line has changed on that, but I know that it's been tried to be crowbarred in as a pre-First Doctor adventure, a very young First Doctor. But I don't like that. It's just a sidestep and a bloody nice one if you read it
Mm.
like that.
It's the one book that does, vast armies are massing around Gallifrey, the Sontarans and the Rootans. It just feels massive. Lars Parkin can do big science fiction, but he can also, as we've said throughout this episode, he can do the small, very beautiful moments as well.
Oh,
He's
it's
just an
wonderful.
incredibly good writer.
He's probably my favourite Who writer.
That was going to be my question for the second episode that we do at the beginning. So save that for. Okay. If there's anything we haven't covered, say your piece. But otherwise, sort of summarize the Gallifrey Chronicles for you.
There's any number of ways I could eulogize about this book for hours. So I'm not going to. I mean, there's lots of little things peppered through it, and I just got the tingle all the time, over and over and over. Just lots of little things like Fitz and Tricks getting together. I thought that was a nice way of wrapping up their story, bringing Angie in, really nice, tying in with the book's own continuity. The Doctor's kissing back to really his very first adventures, a
Yeah.
TV movie, and it just had that circular nature that it sort of bookended the range really nicely. It was continuity heavy without being wanky. It was a solid story. There were great characters in it. The settings were vivid. The writing was vivid. I mean, they are tacked in the Vor. Even that third of the novel with this alien invasion, even though it's not supposed to be there, it's really nicely done and self-contained and well described. And there's a reason for all this. Oh, this is just a really great book. I'm so glad you asked me to do it because
I
it's
love
one of the
hearing
very
you,
best of the
forgive
range.
me, but I love hearing you gush, Ken. Honestly, if you haven't heard this podcast, he's normally the grumpy, not the grumpy one, but the cynical one. It's so lovely to hear you just your heart exploding. I would say as well, just on top of everything you just said there, which I agree with, I think this is a book that rewards every single time you read it. The rereadability of this book, because there's so many of those Easter eggs in there.
Yeah.
And I don't always spot them. You've given me a reading on something today that I never saw before. Mike Mills did exactly the same thing when I did Father Time with him. Lance Parkin books are just so packed with treats. It's like you're constantly unwrapping the present, you know? You know, when you unwrap a present and then it's really quite disappointing, but it looks so enticing.
It does.
Reading a Lance Parkin book, you're just always unwrapping. You know, you never get to the boring present because you're constantly discovering new things. It's great on that level as well.
There's one line, a last thought, there was one line in the Infinity Doctors where within the prose, he mentions the page number of a hypothetical book that you only find out this sort of thing on page 230, and it's on page 230. And it's just those little clever writing flourishes that are in every single one of the man's books. I don't know what his writing career is like outside of Doctor Who, but he really should have one because
he's in America now. He script edited, I think, Emmerdale for quite some time. And so he worked on telly for a while, and he's in America and he's still writing. Yeah, of course. I mean, he's a talent. Of course he's writing.
Oh, yes.
Well, look, Ken, you know, I thought I wasn't going to have time, but I've just sent a message to my work and I'm going to be about 10 minutes later than I thought I was going to be. So would you care, please, for the very first time on the Hamster Book Club, to hand me your recommendation to the audience, please?
It's The Harvest of Time by Alistair Reynolds. This is one of those books that they did. They started when they got to sort of the Matt Smith era, dropping in the odd extraneous book to the book range. Sort of a hardback, a serious, solid Doctor Who novel by established authors. And some of them hit, some of them didn't. I remember there was the very first one they did. It got savaged, and it was by this really experienced writer. But he had no idea how to do Doctor Who.
You're talking about Michael Moorcock, aren't you? And The Coming of the Terror Files.
Now you're putting words into my mouth.
I chose that book. One of the questions I did once as an icebreaker was, what book do you wish you'd never started that was Doctor Who? And mine was Michael Moorcock's The Coming of the Terror Files. Oh, it was impenetrable.
Yeah, it was fairly bad. But no, Harvest of Time, it's so quietly Doctor Who on the cover because it's on the front cover, but it's not actually on the spine. So if you saw it in a bookshop, you'd never know. But that is the third Doctor and the Delgado Master, and that is so screwed down. It's last of the Gadarene level of good for that era. Yeah. Did you ever read it?
Like a nostalgia buzz.
Yeah, but with a 21st century budget, because they've got this prison for the Master, and it's so complex how they actually lock him away in his cell, and all these cranes and things pick up his cell and lock it into a secure compound, and then bars come down and just seal it. It's so complicated, but you can picture it vividly. That was a really, really solid Doctor Who.
I suppose if they're going to fork out for a well-known author, is that one of those big chunky hardbacks with an extra page count?
Yeah.
And you know what? It is strange because some pretty prestige writers have had a go, haven't they? Didn't Stephen Baxter do one?
He did. I can't remember.
The Wheel of Ice, was it? Yeah, The Wheel of Ice, second Doctor book.
Yeah, and I started it, but I never finished it.
No, I'm exactly the same, but then I've never really got on with Baxter, if I'm honest.
I've got to express my ignorance here. I don't know who any of these people are.
Fair enough. They're all established sort of science fiction authors. I mean, we've got the ultimate science fiction author writing Doctor Who, Douglas Adams, back in the day.
Yes. And people get on with his work, some people don't, but I think Sharda is a work of art.
Oh, me too. Well, look, I'm going to recommend, and I don't ever recommend the new series Adventures, but I feel as if I probably should recommend one, and it's a Jacqueline Rayner book.
Solid ground.
Which I immediately just love because I love her work. I don't think she's produced anything that isn't at least entertaining, but at her best with Big Finish and with the novels, she delivers some of the best work you're going to see, Doctor Who and the Pirate, stuff like that. I would like to recommend The Stone Rose, which is one of the...
Really?
Did you like it? No, hang on, bear with me. Because it is a light, fun read and it peppers in history and it peppers in cultural references. It's not for me. It's not for, a 43-year-old bloke. This book is written as a Doctor Who book for the kids that were watching the new series at the time. And I think on those terms, it delivers. Yeah, it's simply written, but it does have some complexities to the plot. It characterizes the Doctor and Rose really well. It has really fun set pieces in it. And I'll say again, it's got some gentle history in there as well. Within the remit of what the new series Adventures are supposed to be doing, I think it's a solid read. Fight me.
I can't. It's been that long since I've read it. I remember there being a statue of Rose in it in some Greek garden or other. It's been a long time since I've read that one. I mean, I will champion this with you that all of the New Adventures books, they were a very easy read. In fact, I have just recently, I've been meaning to do it for years. I read that Halloween Forever Autumn by Mark Morris.
Oh, that had some lovely prose, I remember.
Oh, it was Tennant to a T. I mean, you could hear him saying every single line. And I think if a book can really capture the characters and the way of speaking and the mannerisms and the little things you're familiar with on screen, you're there. I mean, Jacqueline Rayner, I'm never going to fight you on that. My first real exposure to Jacqueline Rayner was The Marian Conspiracy.
Oh, still one of the best things she ever did.
It's one of the best things Big Finish ever did.
Oh, no.
You're never going to go wrong for me with Evelyn Smythe. I think an older companion, bang, you are in there. Specifically, an older woman companion.
I think once she gets going as well, Jacqueline Rayner, she writes The Last Dodo, which is a fabulously fun book with Martha and the 10th Doctor, where they're going around the universe and somebody's trying to wipe out species and they're trying to find the last of each species. And we do a bit on Earth, so the kids learn all about sort of extinct species on Earth, hence The Last Dodo. And of course, the final gag of the book is the last of the Time Lords, the Doctor, and you get points for every single extinct species that you find. And Martha ticks off at the end 15 million points or something like that because she found the last of the Time Lords. At their best, Paul Mars' Sick Building, Simon Messingham does the Doctor Trap, Lance Parkin does the Eyeless. Simon Gurrier does the Pirate Loop. At their best, I'm not going to say they're the best of like the Eighth Doctor range, but they're really good books. I just think there's a lot of sort of tie-in-ness mundanity about some of them. But I don't think they're all a complete write-off. I think there's some good stuff there. I want to cover one day. I haven't done it yet.
I don't think they are a write-off. No, they're very consistent. You know what you're going to get. They're solid, very easy reads. And I've got to say, very beautifully presented. I quite like the whole mini hardback thing. I thought they were just lovely pocket-sized, really nice. They look great on the shelf.
They started bringing them out as paperbacks in sets, didn't they? I was like, no, that's the whole point. They're beautiful. I'll tell you what, Ken, I was working for a book distributor at the time they were coming out. They were selling in the hundreds of thousands, those books. That's when Doctor Who was at its peak. The last 8 Doctor Adventures, you'd be lucky to sell 10,000 from the distributor. But those new series adventures, boy, oh boy, they were gobbling them up like sweets.
Well, it's like I've said about Harry Potter, which gets a reference in Gallifrey Chronicles. There are 9 sequels in that timeline.
Yes, there was.
But if there's something, I don't care what it is, that gets kids to pick up books voluntarily and read, I don't care what it is. Carry on.
I like to call
Doctor Who did that to a generation of kids. Go Doctor Who.
I like to call it the Terrence Dicks effect.
Oh, Uncle Terrence.
I think that's a lovely way to round off this episode. And thank you very much, because what a joy it was to read that and talk to you about it. Would you be down to 1, return, and 2, to dive into a book you've already mentioned on this podcast today, War of the Daleks?
Oh, of course I would. I would love to. Joe, I always love recording with you. It's a lot of fun. And this in particular, I haven't read any of these books. Well, I never reread anything anyway, because I simply don't have time. Well, I've not so much got a reading pile as a reading bookcase. I've put a moratorium on buying any more books. But War of the Daleks, I would love to do with you. Yes, of course.
I remember loathing that when it came out, and you loved it. So that should be a much more balanced conversation next time. I mean, maybe I'll love it this time. We'll see. It's John Peel, so chances are I won't. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Brace
yourself, old boy.
But thank you very much. Would you very quickly just let everybody know where you are out there in podcast land before we go?
You can find me with Dr. Simon Exton at the Exton Moss Experiment, the Archive of Audio Antiquities, Kinky Boots, and the Tonic Screwdriver podcasts, and also with Paul Isles Rush at 9bob Note, which is an LGBT podcast.
Oh, I've got to check that out. I've not heard that
it's
one.
basically a gay and a non-gay coming at primarily LGBT issues, but sometimes not. Sometimes we just fancy.
Oh man, I know your opinions can be a little controversial as well, so I'm going to dive into that now.
He's trying to
gay and
educate
a non-gay.
me.
I'm sold.
But thank you, Joe. It's been my pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back.
Pleasure is all mine.
Thanks to Joe for letting us use that recording, and if you're interested in hearing more Doctor Who book reviews, he and his regular team cover ranges spanning from the first Target books of the 1970s right through to the new series adventures being published today. He's an excellent host and probably the most prolific podcaster out there. Next time we're joined by Alex Wilcock for a review of Undermined, a science fiction drama series from 1965. Until then, thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back soon. Ta-ta.
The Exton Moss Experiment featured Simon Exton and Ken Moss. All featured soundtracks are the property of their respective producers, and no infringement of copyright is intended. Title music was performed by the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and the programme was produced by Maverick Productions. For more information, please visit maverickproductionsuk.blogspot.com or find us on social media.